Hey, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Wait just a few to let some people get on here. If you're watching, tell us hello, tell us where you're watching from, let us know you're here.
There we go. They're starting now. Got a couple on there. Hi, Lori. Hi, Ashley and Aaron. Ashley. Oh, they're all coming.
There we go. Several people coming now.
We've got people from South Dakota, Kansas, Louisiana. Hi, Tammy. All right, guys, we have a special guest with us today. We have Dr. Travis White, and he is going to talk to us about the importance of colostrum.
Please leave any questions that you might have in the comments. Dr. White is here to answer all of those for you, or just say hello. Let us know where you're viewing from, because at the end of this segment, we are going to be giving away a little bit of little prize to one lucky viewer. Is going to win some Colostrx. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Dr. White, and you now have the floor.
All right, thank you. If anybody has trouble hearing me or anything, please let us know, and I can change up the audio maybe. But I guess to give a little background on myself, I'm Dr. Travis White. I serve as technical service veterinarian for Saskatoon Colostrum Company. I went to undergraduate at Utah State University, and then vet school up at Washington State. And then following vet school, I opened a clinic in central South Dakota, which I owned and operated for 8 years, and then sold that practice and went to Transova Genetics, where I was head of their training department. About a year ago, I had the opportunity to come on with Saskatoon and have been serving in this role ever since. I'm a native of Southeast Idaho, so I grew up in the Malad Valley of Southeast Idaho, and back in May had the opportunity to relocate back out here. So they asked me to talk today on the importance of colostrum, and we're going to hit on some of the key points of colostrum, and then what's unique about Colostrx. So the brand that is up for the giveaway, it's one of the brands that we produce, and we'll talk a little bit about Colostrx and why it's unique to the marketplace. So to start off, I want to just ask a question. So, what happens when a herd is left vulnerable without antibodies? So we see this playing out in human medicine right now with coronavirus. So coronavirus is a novel virus that humans hadn't come into contact with, or at least this strain hadn't come into contact with in the past. And so we didn't have any antibodies against that. And then when the virus is presented to us, then now we're vulnerable. And so we have mass infections and large amounts of deaths. Well, the same thing happens in cattle operations. So if a herd doesn't have antibodies toward a specific pathogen, then once that pathogen is introduced, we can see large numbers of animals becoming ill or dying from that. We see this all the time with salmonella. And so with salmonella, a herd may have gone several years without having salmonella, and then all of a sudden it gets introduced onto the farm, and it causes large numbers of infections. Next question I want to ask, and these are just kind of rhetorical, but where do calves get antibodies from? Well, unlike humans, when we're in the womb, we get all the antibodies that we need via the umbilical cord from our mother. Calves are different. So the placentation is different in bovines. And so when a calf is born, they don't have any antibodies to protect them against disease. And so the only place that they're able to get protection is by ingesting colostrum. And so the colostrum that they ingest has a plethora of antibodies in there and other bioactive factors that help them to get off on a good start. And so oftentimes people will ask, well, what's the problem with my colostrum? Why can't I just use the colostrum that my cows produce? And they're in most instances, there's nothing wrong with that colostrum. But there may be some challenges that we need to address, things like lack of volume. So heifers, first calf heifers, are notorious for having a low volume of colostrum. And so there may be some opportunity where we can supplement those animals and have better results in our calves. Disease transmission. So if we have a cow that has known Johne's disease or mycoplasma mastitis, or other diseases that we don't want to transmit onto the calf, then this may be an area where we want to replace the colostrum for those calves. Variable concentration. So Mother Nature is inherently variable. So from cow to cow, there may be variation in concentration or quality of the colostrum that she produces. If we go into an average beef herd in the U.S., and we were to test all those calves for passive transfer, on average, 20 to 30% of those calves would fail passive transfer because of this variation in concentration. And then it may be inconvenient. So when we think about late night calvings or emergency situations, it may be inconvenient to get that cow in and get the calf to mother. And, the rancher just wants to be done with his evening and go in and get a few hours of sleep before he has to check the next calving. And so it may be inconvenient. It may be an opportunity to have some colostrum on hand in those situations. And so I'm going to talk about a few different things here. One is, emergency replacement. So those late night calvings. And then when do we replace versus when do we supplement? So the next question I ask, and some people may be wondering, well, 20 to 30% of calves have failure of passive transfer. Well, what does that mean? Well, if colostrum intake is inadequate, then those calves with failure of passive transfer are 9.5 times more likely to become sick than the calves that achieve passive transfer. They're also 5.5 times more likely to die prior to weaning. They grow at about 2/3 the rate of their counterparts. Their feed efficiency can be reduced by up to 50%. They have an increased age at first breeding and age at first calving. So there's a lot of things that can impact, or a lot of things can be impacted by colostrum intake, and these can have lifelong impacts. We know on the dairy side of things, we do a lot of studies to look at lifelong milk production, and we know that a calf that fails to reach passive transfer, there's about $1,500 in lost opportunity costs there. And one of the interesting things is that the majority of that lost opportunity cost is due to decreased lactation or decreased milk production in the first and second lactation. So these are lifelong consequences that may affect this animal throughout its life. So when we think about colostrum and how we need to, the importance of colostrum, we need to really think about how we're going to position this in our herds. So we know that colostrum needs to be given to the calf in a timely manner. So the absorption of colostrum is best in the first 2 hours of life. By 6 hours, it's down to about 50% of the original capacity. And by 12 hours, we're down into the mid to lower teens of absorptive capacity. So we need to be able to get that colostrum in quick. And so ideally, in the perfect scenario, the calf is born, it gets up quickly, it nurses mom, they mother up. Within 4 to 6 hours, it comes back for another colostrum meal. But if there's anything that happens that could negatively affect this, then we need to be able to intervene and to provide either a colostrum substitute or a colostrum supplement or a replacer to those calves. So when we think about emergency replacement, any stress that happens to these calves, so whether it's dystocia, cold stress, heat stress, anything like that, it's going to decrease their ability to absorb the colostrum that's presented to them by 35%. And so we know that it needs to be in a timely manner. We need to get it in quick in the first 2 hours. But if there's any stress, that's going to further reduce the ability of that calf to absorb the colostrum that it's been given. And so when we talk about replacement versus supplementation, then so that's kind of a two different scenarios. So supplements are a partial dose of colostrum that we can give that just adds a nice boost to the immunoglobulin, and then a nice bump in fat, in energy that these calves need. So when we supplement, those are going to be, again, those first calf heifers that have the low volume that we talked about, cows that maybe have leakage from the udder. Some of these cows will start leaking colostrum 2 to 3 hours prior to calving. And if we notice that, then this may be a scenario where we want to supplement that calf. If the calf is slow to recover, so maybe the calf's a little slow to get up, but we're certain it's going to get up and go back for more colostrum meals, then this may be an area where we can provide some supplementation to give that calf a quick energy boost and get it up and going. Twins, I'll argue later that twins, we maybe should just go with full replacement on those. So then we've got the supplement, and then now when we talk about replacer, now replacer is 100 grams or more of colostrum, where the supplement is typically around 50 grams. So we were going to touch on Colostrx here. So Colostrx comes in two formulations. It's got the Colostrx CS, which is the supplemental dose. That's the 50 gram presentation. And then there's Colostrx CR, which is the replacer dose. And that comes in the 100 gram presentation. So then how do we decide when we replace? Well, when we replace, those are going to be, again, those calves that are born via dystocia. So if it's a C-section, or we have to pull the calf or assist in any way, maybe it's an extended calving that the cow's been struggling for a while, then we would want to give them a full replacer dose, because that major decrease in the ability of them to absorb the colostrum that they've been given. If there's a cow that has a history of poor quality colostrum, so a cow that has weaned a light calf in the past, maybe a cow that has a history of a calf developing pneumonia or scours, this may be an animal that we want to replace the colostrum on. And then body condition score. So if we have cows coming in that are have low body condition score, or they're not in as good a flesh as maybe we want, we've experienced some drought conditions coming into calving, and they haven't been able to put on flesh like we want them to, then this may be another area where we want to replace colostrum. Bottle calves, so orphans, mom dies for whatever reason during calving, then we need to fully replace colostrum with them. And then, like I said, I would argue that twins need to be replaced. So with twins, we know that there's going to be an issue with volume because there's not enough colostrum produced to support both of those twins. The other issue is we don't know which twin is going to be able to get the majority of the colostrum. So it's better to just replace both calves, and then they can use the colostrum in the udder as secondary feedings moving forward. What about cold calves? So we know that on average about, I was just looking up at some statistics here, but the USDA estimates that hypothermia kills approximately 100,000 calves a year. And so what do we do about those cold calves? The calf that you find flat out in the pasture, we're not sure if they've had colostrum or what, or if they've been able to nurse mom at this point. Well, we need to warm those calves up until the suckle reflex returns. Once the suckle reflex returns, then their ability to absorb colostrum is somewhat adequate. If we were to give colostrum to those calves before the suckle reflex is there, then their ability to absorb colostrum has been reduced to 10%. And so we really need to warm those calves up. So we can, put them in a hot box and get them warm. One of the great ways we did it at the clinic, we had a hot tub, and so we would put them in in a contractor bag and then submerge them in the hot tub. The contractor bag kept them dry, so they didn't have to dry out afterward, and then the hot tub was able to warm them quickly. Once that suckle reflex is returned, then we need to fully replace colostrum because we're unsure if they had colostrum to begin with. We do know that colostrum or colostral fat, so it's a unique fat source that is found in colostrum. It is what stimulates brown fat metabolism. So brown fat is a specialized fat that most mammals are born with. Calves in particular have 1 to 2% of their body weight is brown fat. And that brown fat is what helps them thermoregulate during cold temperatures. And then the colostral fat that they ingest helps them to mobilize or metabolize that brown fat so that they can thermoregulate. And so these calves that we've found that are flat out, many times they haven't had any colostrum, and they haven't had that colostral fat to help light the fire of the brown fat so they can thermoregulate. So we need to fully replace these calves. It gives them by fully replacing, it gives them a nice energy source so they can get up and become active. Again, the colostral fat ignites the fire for that brown fat. And then it also provides a heat sink in the abdomen. So by filling up their GI tract with warm fluids, then they continue to warm themselves from the inside out. One thing I did want to touch on briefly before we take questions is scours treatment. So this is kind of a new or a novel approach to scours treatment. If we had a calf that was experiencing scours, what typically would we do? Well, most of the time we're going to give them antibiotics. But when we think about antibiotics, if it's a viral scours like rota, corona, or if it's protozoal like cryptosporidia, then those antibiotics aren't going to have any effect on those pathogens. The other thing is even the bacterial scours pathogens like E. coli and salmonella, they're becoming pan-resistant to antibiotics. And so the antibiotics that we're using may not work. A lot of times we're going to be prescribed electrolytes for these calves, maybe things like prebiotics like biomoss, probiotics, maybe even anti-inflammatories like banamine or flunixamine. But what about colostrum? So when we think about colostrum, we know that there's the immunoglobulins there, and those immunoglobulins are what protects the calf against pathogenic insult. But it's much more than just immunoglobulin. So and even using colostrum as a scours treatment, although those immunoglobulins are no longer absorbed, they do have a local binding effect on pathogens. It also has this colostral fat that we talked about that's a potent energy source, but it also has sialic acid projections on it that actually function as a natural antimicrobial. There's other immune factors or growth factors that are essential for the development of the GI and keeping the GI tract healthy while they're going through this pathogenic insult. And then there's non-specific proteins like lactoferrin, lysozyme, lactobumin. Many of these are, again, natural antimicrobial agents, and some of them act as anti-inflammatories like the banamine. Lactoferrin is something that many of us have heard about here recently, again with COVID, because lactoferrin tends to have some impact on coronaviruses. Well, calves are susceptible to coronaviruses. And so this lactoferrin can have some impact on reducing the clinical signs of scours. And then there's oligosaccharides. So oligosaccharides are things like biomoss and other oligosaccharides. Well, colostrum has over 40 of these prebiotics, if you will. And so it's already got it's already got those, like the biomosses in there. And so there's 240, 250 different bioactive compounds within colostrum that we know about. There's probably thousands others that we haven't discovered quite yet. But these prebiotics go to support the gut health and keep the natural flora of the gut healthy and robust to fight off pathogens. So it's something to think about. We're doing some trials here this year, hopefully to substantiate our thoughts here. I used colostrum as a scours treatment in my practice. It really became my go-to scours treatment for cryptosporidia because there's not a lot of great treatment options for cryptosporidia out there. And so something to keep in the back of your mind as we go into the calving season, and if we have that calf that is struggling with scours, maybe colostrum would be a way to help that calf out. Typically, if we're using it as a scours treatment, we feed them about a 170 or 140 grams of powder for 5 to 10 days or so. And within a day or two, the scours volume and consistency improves. Again, colostrum is specifically suited for rota, corona, crypto, and E. coli. So again, just something to keep in the back of your mind there. The other thing I want to hit on, and this will be kind of as we get into more about Colostrx, is what are some of the things you need to ask about or understand about your colostrum that you're using? Well, the first one is it made from real bovine colostrum? And Colostrx is made from whole bovine colostrum. There's really nothing added, nothing taken away. So it's got all those bioactives that we talked about. And it's a natural energy source for calves. And then does it offer a high level of immune protection? So as we look at competitor products, the immunoglobulin is the thing that we are concerned about, especially in day one colostrum. But with natural whole bovine colostrum, about 85 to 90% of the immunoglobulin is in the form of IgG1. And that's the only immunoglobulin that can be absorbed by the calf and then resecreted out onto the mucosal membranes like the GI tract or the respiratory tract. When we look at blood or whey-based products, that ratio gets skewed. So only about 50% is IgG1 and the rest is made up of IgG2. So even though on the label it may say 100 grams of IgG, there's really only about 50% of that is going to be available to the calf. So it needs to be whole bovine colostrum. And then what is the energy source? So again, we're looking at, we want to use a colostrum that has an energy source that is colostral fat. A lot of the component products are going to have things like edible tallow, coconut oil, vegetable oil. And so maybe that's one thing I should talk about is when I say whey or a component or serum versus whole bovine colostrum. So whole bovine colostrum is just what it says. It's colostrum that's been harvested from cows around the world. It's been tested to identify its potency, and then it gets standardized, heat treated, dried, and packaged. When we talk about serum-based products, then those are from cows that have been hyperimmunized, and then they take they remove the blood and then separate the serum, and then that serum is what becomes the IgG source for those serum-based products. And then component colostrum are those where the immunoglobulin may come from whey, or it may even come from colostrum, but then they take the immunoglobulins out of the colostrum and they set that aside for calves. And then all the other bioactives that we talked about that are so beneficial for the calves, well, they have huge benefit on the human side. So things like colostral fat are very important in the cosmetic industry. We talked about lactoferrin and its role with the coronavirus. And so they're harvesting lactoferrin for human medicine. When we talk about things like the growth factors and things like that they're very big in the exercise or bodybuilding industry. And so they take all those bioactives that are beneficial for the calf, and they strip those out and they market those on the human side of things. And then essentially with both with both serum and component colostrums, they take those IgGs that they've harvested and then they try to recreate colostrum with 60 to 80 other ingredients. So I think of this much like the Impossible Burger, where, cows have been making meat in a perfect form for millennia, and then now we believe we can take all these different ingredients in a laboratory and make something that is equivalent to meat. Well, colostrum is the same way. Cows have been making colostrum in a perfect form for a long time, and then it's somewhat of a fallacy to believe we can take GGs and recreate colostrum using these other ingredients. So it's more or less like milk replacer with some added IgG in it. So we really want to make sure that we have colostral fat as our energy source. There are some other competitors out there that tout having a highly concentrated colostrum where they're able to get more immunoglobulin per bag, and it is quote unquote colostrum. But the problem with that is what they do to get that higher concentration is they strip the colostral fat and the casein out. So again, we've talked about the importance of colostral fat and how important it is. So we don't want to be taking the colostral fat out, but then the casein also is a protein that causes the milk or colostrum to clot in the abomasum. And if we take the casein out, then that clot doesn't form. And many people have said, well, they don't need a clot to form in the first day of life. But as we do more research, we know that casein is the only protein that is available to that calf for the first 72 hours of life until its abomasum becomes truly acidic. And so even those colostrum, whole bovine colostrum, where they've taken the colostral fat and the casein out, is doing an injustice to the calf. We really need to have all of the components in there because they're all important. And then with that, I guess is your product convenient? So, we want a product that is a 2 to 4 quart final mix volume, depending on if it's a supplement or a replacer. It's got a 3-year shelf life, and it's somewhat instant mix. So we can just put it in warm water and get it into solution and feed to the calves. As I touch on some of that, there are some key points when we're using colostrum. When we're using replacers or supplements, we do need to make sure that the water temperature is adequate. So we need to get the water temperature up to about 120 degrees. That'll help to emulsify this colostral fat that is so important. And that'll help it to get into solution better. If the water's too cold, then that fat doesn't emulsify. And if the water temperature is too high, then it will denature the proteins. And so it won't provide the benefit that the calf needs. So that's kind of all I had. I guess we can open it up for questions now, and we can go through some of that.
Heather had a couple questions. So her first one was, when using a refractometer and 22 and greater is good to use, do you recommend using replacer on calves that mothers provide less than 22?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's a couple of options there, and I think Juliana kind of answered some of this, but we have the opportunity to either fully replace or we can enrich. And so we do have a table, or there is an app in the App Store where we can enrich to get to the desired Brix level that we want. So we can still use the maternal colostrum that's provided, and we can just add enough powder in there to bring it up to the correct Brix reading.
Okay. Her other question was, how many quarts do you give a scoured calf, and how many feedings of it while she has scours?
Yeah, so this is, again, we're doing some research on this right now. When I was in practice, I was giving a quarter of a bag. I didn't know what I was doing. I was kind of making it up on the fly. And so I was giving it a quarter of a bag, and I would put it in kind of where I would give an electrolyte. So I wouldn't, or if the calf was still with mom, you know, I would have them pin them up and then pull the calf out and feed it colostrum once a day. I was mixing it with a quart of water, a quart to 2 quarts, depending on dehydration status. We have had some people that are mixing it into a slurry and then using a dosing syringe to give that. And so that's been working well as well. So there's a lot of different options on how to do that. We just need to get it into the calf to provide that protection. And then again, as far as duration of treatment, I was doing it for 5 days and that seemed to work well. Sometimes with crypto, you will get a recrudescence. And so you may have to extend that out to 10 days, but usually 5 days is adequate.
Does anybody else have any questions? Nothing. I don't think so. Travis, do you have any more to add?
Yeah. Hang on. I guess just a few of the talking points on colostrum. You know, again, like I said, it comes in a replacer option or a supplement option. And so whatever your needs are on your farm, I would recommend having a few of both. Again, emergency situations where we need to replace, and then those first calf heifers or the calf that's slow to get up, being able to give them the supplement. You know, I guess just to reiterate, any calf that has a rough start, I would look at supplementing or to replace there. And then again, one thing I did in practice was I had a calving kit that I would do for my clients. So, and kind of, it would have a set, because what are the things that every rancher needs when they start calving and they can no longer find? Well, they lost their chains and handles. They lost their esophageal feeder. So I'd get a bucket, put chains and handles, an esophageal feeder, and a couple bags of colostrum, and everybody would come in and pick up their calving kit. And so just having that on hand is key. You need it, you know, you never have it when you need it typically. So thinking ahead and having a few bags on hand are some of the key things that we should do. I see another question here. At what age do you no longer use it as a scours treatment? So as a scours treatment, you can use this for any age of calf. So whether the calf is 1 to 5 days old with some E. coli scours, you can use it. Or if it's that calf that's 7 to 12 days old, suffering from viral scours, you can use it. So there's no age where you can't use the colostrum anymore. And interestingly, so the way that I ran across this in practice was we had a highly virulent cryptosporidia that would kill calves very rapidly. No matter what I was doing, I couldn't keep them alive. And so one night I was doing a Google search and came across these articles about AIDS patients. And one of the number one killers of AIDS patients is cryptosporidia infections. And the way they treat them is they feed them whole bovine colostrum. And I was like, well, if it works for a calf, then, or for a human, maybe it'll work for a calf. And so I started using that as a treatment. And it revolutionized the way I treated crypto scours, because within a day or two, those calves are back to normal. They're feeling good. They're back nursing. And with the other treatment modalities, it just never seemed like they could ever catch their feet.
All right. If you don't have anything else to add, we're going to go ahead and draw our winner for today.
Great.
Okay.
One lucky winner is going to get a couple of bags of the Colostrx CS.
All right. And the winner for today is Heather Miller. So, woo!
Congratulations, Heather.
Congratulations, Heather.
Okay, we want to thank Dr. White. Thank you for coming on here and doing this for us, for answering all the questions. That was a great presentation. If you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to type those in the comments. I'm sure that we can get Dr. White to help us and answer those. And we have a couple of announcements before we sign off today. Join us Thursday. We will be talking about winter calving and supplies.
And also, don't forget, our Lucky 7 sweepstakes is going on now, so get signed up. The deadline is February 26th, so get signed up now so you don't forget.
All right. Thank you again, Dr. White.
Thank
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody. Have a good day.
We'll see ya.